What if the man who stood in front of millions and apologized was still hiding the most important part of the story? When Lovy Elias stood on that stage, eyes wet, voice shaking, and hands trembling, it felt like a moment of truth. He confessed, he said he failed, he asked for forgiveness. And for a moment, the world softened. People cried with him. Some even praised him for his courage. But here's what no one told you. His apology didn't answer the real questions. In fact, it raised even more. He apologized to the church, to his wife, to his son. But did you notice something? He never mentioned the victims. Not even once. Not their names, not their pain, not their side of the story. It was as if they didn't exist, as if their pain was just a small chapter in his big story of redemption. But what if that pain was the whole story? People close to the case started whispering. Why now? They asked. Why this sudden apology after years of silence? Some believed it was a move to save his image before things got worse. Others believed he had no choice, that something big was coming, and this apology was just a shield, a way to soften the blow. Behind the scenes, things were different. People who knew him, really knew him, started talking. They said there were patterns, not just one moment of weakness, but repeated actions, hidden behaviors, covered tracks. They said people tried to speak up before, but their voices were silenced, brushed off, ignored. One woman who asked to stay anonymous said something that shook me. It wasn't just what he did, it was how they protected him after. That one line changed everything, because this wasn't just a story about one man failing. It was about a system that allowed it, a group of people who looked the other way, who chose image over truth. Inside the church, not everyone was celebrating his apology. Some members left quietly. They didn't clap. They didn't pray. They just walked away. They said the apology felt staged, like a performance. And when they asked questions, they were told to have grace, to move forward and let God handle it. But how do you move forward when the past is still full of secrets? What shocked me the most was how the apology made him look like the victim. The emotional music, the heavy pauses, the dramatic words, all of it painted a picture of a broken man trying to heal. But where were the broken women, the broken families, the ones still trying to sleep at night, still waiting for someone to say, I believe you? This wasn't just a moment of confession. It was a carefully planned moment of control. And here's the wildest part. Some insiders believe the apology was timed, that it was meant to come before a certain woman spoke out, a woman who had been silent for years, a woman who had evidence, a woman who was tired of being invisible. Now, the real question was, who was protecting who? Was the church protecting him? Or were they protecting themselves? Because if the truth came out, it wouldn't just break his image. It could break the entire foundation of the leadership. And maybe that's why the apology was made to the people with the most power, not the people with the most pain. The woman stayed quiet for almost 7 years, not because she wanted to, but because she was warned. She was told things like, don't ruin the church, and you don't want to be the reason people lose faith. At first, she believed them. She thought maybe staying silent was the godly thing to do. But silence doesn't heal wounds. It hides them. And the longer she stayed silent, the louder the guilt became. Her name wasn't known to the public, but inside church circles, they whispered about her. They called her the girl who caused trouble. They said she was confused, emotional, even bitter. But no one asked why she was emotional. No one asked what made her bitter. They only judged what they saw, not what she had survived. And when she finally tried to speak up years ago, her voice was met with cold faces and closed doors. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. She had kept everything: emails, messages, a recorded call. She didn't plan to keep it as evidence. At first, it was just her trying to understand what had happened. trying to hold on to something that felt real, even though everything around her felt fake. But now, those saved moments, those digital scars, were proof, not just of what was done to her, but of how the church handled it. In one email, a senior leader from the church didn't deny what happened. He just asked her to be wise with her words and think about the bigger picture. That bigger picture was always the excuse. It was always about the reputation of the church, the ministry, the brand. But what about her? Was her pain not part of that picture? When Lovy Elias gave his apology, she watched it alone. She said her hands were shaking, her stomach was tight, and by the time he said, "I take full responsibility," she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like a lie wrapped in a beautiful speech. Taking responsibility would have meant naming her, acknowledging her, maybe even asking for her forgiveness. But she was never mentioned, not even once. This was the moment everything changed. She decided she wouldn't stay quiet anymore. She reached out to someone, a journalist who had been following stories of church abuse for years. She showed her everything, the screenshots, the dates, the patterns, and slowly a bigger picture began to form. One that made the apology feel less like repentance and more like damage control. What's worse, she wasn't the only one. The journalist found others, women in different cities, same church, same leader, same silence. They were told the same things. You misunderstood. He's a man of God. This isn't the right time. And slowly, they began to believe maybe it was their fault. Maybe they were imagining things. Maybe they were the ones who needed healing. But now they were starting to realize it wasn't just them. It was a pattern. One of the women said something that still echoes in my mind. We didn't just survive what he did. We survived what the church did after. And that line changes everything, because this wasn't just about one man failing. It was about how many people helped him stay standing while the victims were left to fall alone. Behind the scenes, the church was panicking. Whispers of a public statement, private meetings, legal talks. They didn't expect her to speak. They thought the apology would be enough. But what they didn't understand was that truth doesn't go away just because someone says, "I'm sorry." The story started spreading, first slowly, like a whisper, then suddenly like a storm. The article was published. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, careful, and deeply painful. The headline didn't name him, but inside, it told everything. The timeline, the messages, the manipulation, the cover-up. People who had once defended the church started asking questions. People who had trusted Lovy Elias began to feel doubt. And the biggest shock, the article didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a cry for truth. At first, the church stayed quiet. No statements, no denials, just silence. But inside, there was chaos. Leaders were divided. Some said they should protect him. Others said they needed to act fast. There were emergency Zoom calls. People deleted old posts. Some removed his photos. Some even unfollowed him. It was like the empire was falling in slow motion. And yet, in public, no one said anything. Not yet. But the victims, they weren't quiet anymore. One by one, they started coming forward. Not just women, men too. Not always about sexual abuse, yes, but spiritual abuse, emotional control, fear tactics. One man said he gave 10 years of his life to that ministry, only to be left with anxiety and confusion. Another said he was told to pray away his depression instead of getting real help. And all of them had the same thread in their story. Lovy Elias was untouchable. Why? Because he wasn't just a preacher, he was a brand. He had books, conferences, millions of followers, and behind him, a machine, a system that protected him at every turn. The church wasn't just a church anymore, it was a business with contracts, partnerships, sponsors, and scandals. Scandals could ruin everything. That's why for so long they buried them. But something happened that the church didn't plan for. A former staff member, someone who had worked closely with Lovy Elias, broke his silence. He posted a long message online. He said he had seen too much. He had stayed quiet out of fear. But now he couldn't carry the guilt anymore. He said, "The version of Lovy Elias that the world knows is not the man I worked with every day." That post exploded. It was shared thousands of times. People who had once called the victims liars were now confused. Doubt was spreading fast, and inside the ministry, people started quitting. Volunteers walked away, donors pulled out. It was like the structure was shaking from the inside. Then came the most unexpected twist of all. A pastor from another megachurch, someone known to be close to Lovy Elias, made a public statement. He said he believed the victims. He said silence was no longer holy, and he challenged others to stop hiding behind grace and start standing for truth. That post caused a ripple. More pastors joined in. Slowly, the silence began to break. But with every new voice, the pressure on Lovy Elias grew. And still, he said nothing. His social media went quiet. No new videos, no Sunday live streams, just silence. But silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's the sound of something falling apart. It was a quiet Sunday morning when a video suddenly went live on his official page. No trailer, no announcement, just a black screen at first, then his face. Lovy Elias looked different, thinner, tired, no suit, no stage, just a plain room with white walls behind him. He took a deep breath and then he spoke, slowly, carefully. His voice, usually strong and passionate, was low, controlled, almost rehearsed. He said he had been in prayer. He said he had reflected deeply. He admitted that mistakes were made, but not once did he mention the victims by name. Not once did he describe what he actually did. Instead, he used vague words, failures, missteps, seasons of weakness. And just when people hoped he would own the truth, he pivoted. He started talking about forgiveness, spiritual attacks, and how God uses broken people. The comments exploded. Some were crying, some were furious. One person wrote, "Where is the apology? Where is the repentance?" Another said, "This feels like a comeback tour, not a confession." But the most painful comments came from victims. They said it felt like being hurt all over again. Watching the man who broke them stand there, carefully managing his image, still refusing to name the damage he caused. But Lovy Elias wasn't done. A week later, he announced a healing tour. Yes, a tour. New cities, new sermons, new songs. He framed it as a comeback, as redemption. He said, "God is not finished with me yet." And shockingly, people started buying tickets. Churches began inviting him again. Some said they were standing on grace. Some said the church needed to move forward. But for many, especially those who had suffered, it felt like betrayal. And that's when something changed. A group of former followers, victims, and even ex-staff came together. They created a platform, not for revenge, but for truth. They shared their stories. They published evidence. They asked one clear question: why do we protect charisma over character? That platform grew fast. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was raw, honest, and more people joined. Documentaries were pitched. News outlets started digging. Old sermons were rewatched, this time with a different lens. Suddenly, things that once sounded inspiring now felt manipulative. The spell was breaking. Slowly, but surely. And in the middle of all this, Lovy Elias kept going, still preaching, still hunting, still pretending. But the seats weren't as full. The energy wasn't the same. Some cities canceled his events. Others protested. A few loyal fans stayed. But the power, the control, the untouchable image, it was fading. This story didn't end with handcuffs or lawsuits or a final dramatic fall. It ended in silence. A different kind of silence. The kind that comes when people stop listening. when the lights dim, when the microphone is on, but no one believes what's coming out of it anymore. Because in the end, Love Elias didn't just lose a position, he lost something deeper, trust. And once that breaks, there's no sermon that can fix it. And maybe that's the real ending. Or maybe it's the beginning of people finally opening their eyes.